Has someone ever tried to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself?
My sister has always had this way of making me feel like whatever I have, whatever I've earned, whatever I've worked for, is somehow just a placeholder until she decides she wants to knock it over, either out of spite or for her own amusement. And the most infuriating part is that our parents have spent my entire life cushioning her from the consequences of that behavior, turning every bad decision into a quirky little story and every selfish move into a misunderstanding that I was expected to forgive. It's been this constant background noise since we were kids. Chloe breaks something of mine, lies about it, Mom says she didn't mean it, and Dad tells me I'm making too big a deal out of it. While Chloe stands there with that smug half-smile like she's watching a rerun of a show she already knows the ending to. So when I tell you that the day she ruined my designer dress and laughed about it wasn't just about a dress, you have to understand that it was years of this same pattern, boiling over into one moment where I realized I was done playing the quiet, reasonable one. That dress was not just some random thing hanging in my closet. It was expensive. It was something I had saved up for, and I had bought it for a specific event where I wanted to feel confident and unapologetically proud of myself for once, without hearing in the back of my mind what Chloe or my parents might have to say about it. I hadn't even had the chance to wear it yet. And then, 2 weeks before the event, Chloe shows up at my place, supposedly to borrow something, which is already a joke, because when she borrows anything, it's code for taking it without any guarantee I'll see it again in the same condition. And she ends up in my room while I'm making coffee. I come back, and the dress is on my bed, but it's been damaged in a way that you cannot undo, the kind of thing you don't even bother trying to fix, because it's just done. She doesn't look shocked or sorry. Instead, she tilts her head and says, almost laughing, "Oh wow, that's a shame. But you know Mom and Dad will just replace it for you, so it's fine." In that moment, I felt this wave of heat go through me, not because of the money, though that stung, but because she was so sure that the same old script would play out. She'd make a mess, they'd swoop in to clean it, and I'd be expected to act like nothing happened. But here's the part she didn't know. For the past few weeks, I had already been setting something in motion, something I hadn't even decided whether I was going to use yet, but the second she said that line, it was like she handed me the perfect opportunity on a silver platter. See, a month earlier, I had been at my parents' house helping Dad with some paperwork because he's terrible with online accounts and statements. While I was in there, I saw that their joint credit card account listed Chloe as an authorized user. I knew instantly that this explained a lot of the mystery charges they'd been brushing off for years, the ones they claimed were just small things or that they must have forgotten about. I also knew that Chloe had this habit of using the card for things that were nowhere close to necessities, things she'd never admit to our parents, because in her mind, if they never see the bill, then it's not really a problem. That day, I didn't say anything. I just quietly took note of the account details, and later that night, I set up online alerts for myself so I could see exactly what she was spending on. I told myself I was just curious, but in the back of my mind, I knew I was collecting ammunition. Over the next few weeks, I watched the charges come in. There were luxury beauty products, restaurant bills that were way beyond casual dining, and even a couple of charges at high-end boutiques I knew she bragged about visiting with her friends. Every time one came through, I'd screenshot it, file it away, and pretend I hadn't seen a thing. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it, but I knew Chloe, and I knew the day would come when she'd hand me the perfect excuse. And now, standing there in my bedroom, looking at my ruined dress and hearing her laugh about it, I realized that day had arrived. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just said, "Right, Mom and Dad will replace it," in the flattest tone I could manage, and I walked out to finish my coffee like we'd just been talking about the weather. Inside, though, my brain was already moving a mile a minute, lining up the pieces, deciding which one to push first. If Chloe thought this was going to be another round of her messing something up and me taking the hit while she got away scot-free, she was about to find out that I had been playing a much longer game. The thing about Chloe is that she thrives when everyone around her is reacting. She feeds off the drama and uses it to twist the story in her favor. So my plan started with not giving her that reaction, not even a flicker of it. If she thought I was shrugging it off, she'd never see the setup coming. And by the time Mom and Dad got involved, thinking they were going to smooth it all over like they always do, the real trap would already be set, and it would be too late for anyone to undo it. She had no idea I'd been holding on to something that would make her regret every smug word. And the best part? She wouldn't even realize what I was doing until the bill landed exactly where I wanted it to. When I told Chloe calmly that I would let Mom and Dad replace it, I watched her relax like she had just parked in a spot with her name painted on the curb, and that shift in her shoulders told me everything about how many times this had worked for her before. Which is why I made a point of not giving her an inch of extra drama to feed on and instead sent a simple text to our mother that said the dress was ruined, that I was disappointed, and that I would appreciate their help, because if they were going to play the same old role, then I was going to play mine better than I ever had, and the only emotion I let bleed through was a tired patience that made it look like I was resigned rather than plotting. Mom called within minutes, her voice doing that soft, soothing routine she uses whenever the goal is to hurry past accountability, and she said of course they would replace it, that Chloe had not meant it. And could I please not turn this into a whole thing right now because my father had enough on his plate? I said no problem, I would handle the order myself to make it easy on everyone, and if they wanted to reimburse me later we could do that. But she cut me off to say they preferred to put it on the card so they could use the points and keep track, which was exactly the opening I had been waiting for, because it meant I could steer the process without looking like I was steering it. I texted Chloe right after and said, since Mom wants it on the card, could you place the order because you have that card on you more often than they do, the one they gave you for emergencies, and I will send you the link and the size, no fuss. She responded with a laughing face I could hear in her tone even without seeing it, and said sure, send it, and add something else if I wanted because she could bundle it and Mom would not blink, which gave me the exact confirmation I needed that she was still using the authorized user card without any fear of leaving fingerprints, since in her mind there was no such thing as fingerprints when you have parents ready to treat every mess as a spill they can mop while telling you how much they love you. I sent the link. I sent the exact item. I even sent the checkout instructions in a way that sounded helpful and harmless, and while she clicked her way through the buy button, I watched my phone light up with the approval alert I had set weeks earlier, the one that tags every authorized user purchase with the user's name and last 4 digits of their subcard, which meant the charge was locked to her in the statement view and would be visible in a way my parents could not ignore unless they decided to close their eyes on purpose. When the confirmation email came in, forwarded to me automatically because I had added myself as a secondary notification contact while helping my dad untangle their online profile, I felt that cold little snap of a puzzle piece dropping into place, not triumph exactly, more like the quiet click you hear when a door you have been pushing against finally gives and you feel the weight shift to your side. Because it was not about the dress anymore, and it was not even about the money, it was about the pattern and the proof, and those two things together leave very little room for the usual excuses. I called my mother back and thanked her for helping, and I told her Chloe took care of it so they would see the charge on the card, and did she want the confirmation number for her records? She said no, she trusted us. And that sentence would have annoyed me any other day, but today it felt like a pin I could tack to the timeline, because trusting us meant trusting the paper trail I had engineered, and I knew exactly how that trail would look when it printed in black and white with Chloe's name attached to a transaction that size. Chloe, for her part, could not resist spiking the ball, and a little later she called me with that smug sing-song voice to say she had added overnight shipping and a few extras because, as she put it, what was the point of the card if not to make our lives easier? Which is the kind of line that sounds almost reasonable if you do not think about who is paying and why, and I let her ramble because the more she revealed, the less I had to, and I took notes while she bragged about how our parents would never notice one more charge on a bill they barely read. A sentence that told me she had not looked at a statement layout in years and had no idea the issuer had changed the format last quarter to flag authorized user spend in its own column with names right next to it. I asked one question, just one, in my most casual voice, which was whether she had used the card from her wallet or the main card number, because sometimes the system split the reporting by subcard and it made returns easier, and she answered without hesitation that she used her card because it was already in the app. Which was the second click in my head because it meant the issuer would tag her as the initiator, and there would be no way to claim the purchase was a mix-up on my end. That night, instead of pacing or reliving the dress moment on a loop like I might have done in the past, I did something that might sound petty but was, in my opinion, a precise move wrapped in politeness. I went into the account settings and requested a one-time paper statement for the upcoming cycle, the full detailed version that breaks out authorized user activity, and I changed nothing else because I did not need to. And then I set a calendar reminder for the week I knew it would hit their mailbox, which my parents still check every afternoon like clockwork, because if you want people to see what is right in front of them, you sometimes have to come to them in the format they still trust. I also used the issuer's messaging portal to confirm that authorized user transactions would reflect under the cardholder's name on the mailed statement, and the representative cheerfully confirmed, which I filed away with the rest of my quiet little receipts. By the time the replacement arrived, Chloe had already posted about it in a way that made it sound like a favor she did for me, which would have pushed my buttons before, but this time it just made me think, keep talking, keep recording your own commentary. Because the louder you get, the more satisfying the silence will be when the paper shows up and the math refuses to bend. And I did the one thing I knew would keep me calm and focused, which was to write out, in plain words, what I wanted out of this. Not a screaming match, not a victory lap, just a line they would not be able to step over again without admitting they were doing it on purpose. So yes, they thought they were replacing the dress, and technically they were, but what they did not know was that I had just handed Chloe the pen and asked her to sign the receipt in her own handwriting, and when the statement landed with her name on that charge, I would not need to raise my voice or argue or convince anyone. I would only need to point to the line item she put there herself and ask a very simple question that no one in my family had ever been forced to answer. The thing about being told to move on is that it only works when the person saying it is not also asking you, with their tone and their history, to step back into the same mess and pretend it smells like something else. So when my parents did their usual routine of smoothing Chloe's edges by calling the replacement a family gesture and urging me to let the accident go because life was too short for grudges, I did not argue. I did not list the pattern for the 100th time. And I did not try to make them see what they had trained themselves not to see. I just said thank you. I appreciate it. I'm relieved to have the replacement squared away. And while they were busy congratulating themselves for keeping the peace, I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a very simple plan that did not require anyone to confess, only for them to read their own mail. I started by pulling the last few months of statements that I had already archived with those automatic alerts, and I built a clean timeline that matched Chloe's authorized user activity with her own public commentary. Which sounds dramatic, but felt more like housekeeping, because when someone brags in group chats about a dinner that could pay a utility bill or posts a picture holding a shopping bag with a caption about treating herself because she deserved it, and the same merchant name appears on the card on the same date under her subcard, you do not need analysis to make the point. You just need a stapler and a highlighter, and I kept the tone of my notes plain and neutral because I was not trying to insult anyone. I was trying to remove excuses, and excuses do not survive long when you lay out the receipts in order and ask one reasonable question at the end. I flagged 3 clusters that mattered: the luxury purchases that could not be spun as errands, the restaurant charges. That did not include my parents or me, even though she sometimes liked to imply she was hosting family, and the subscription that was clearly hers, but had been writing on their card for longer than anyone remembered. A slow drip that adds up to something real when you are the one paying it, and the person benefiting from it treats it like background noise. Then I created 2 versions of the packet because I know how my family processes information. One for my parents in a friendly cover letter voice that thanked them for replacing the dress and said, in the most matter-of-fact way I could write, that the attached authorized user summary might help them understand the pattern I was concerned about, and another for my father's accountant because my father, for all his blind spots, takes anything with the word accountant on it seriously and forwards it like a reflex, and in that second version I did not editorialize at all. I just included the issuer's own cardholder by user report, which breaks down spending by name with totals. And I circled Chloe's column because I wanted the call that would follow to come from someone they considered neutral, not from me, since I learned long ago that the person pointing at the fire in our family often gets accused of loving the smoke. I did not send either packet yet, because timing is half the strategy, and I wanted the envelope with the paper statement to hit first, so the packets would feel like a response to their question rather than a provocation by me, and if that sounds manipulative then fine, maybe it is. But I have been told to be reasonable so many times I could teach a course on it, and being reasonable sometimes means choosing the path that keeps everyone from denying what is right in front of them. In the meantime, I kept my voice level in every exchange, which drove Chloe a little crazy because she kept prodding for drama the way she always does. A snide remark here, a story to mutual friends there about how I overreact to everything. And I let it slide off because I was building something that did not require me to win a single argument. It only required me to be patient enough to let the math do the heavy lifting, and the more calmly I behaved, the more reckless she became, which is why when another alert popped up for a boutique purchase that was not the dress and not even related to me, I simply added it to the timeline and underlined it, not because of the price, though the price would sting, but because of the timing. Since it predated the dress by a couple of weeks and would look, to anyone with eyes, like a pattern rather than a one-off mistake. I also reached out to the card issuer through their chat and asked a very boring, very specific question about whether authorized user transactions appear with the user's name on the mailed statement and whether the detailed breakdown shows per user totals, and when the representative confirmed both in cheerful customer service language that I screenshotted and saved. I felt that steady confidence you get when you stop hoping people will do the right thing and start planning for what they do instead. When the replacement dress arrived, my mother called with a warmth that would have felt lovely if I did not know what it was designed to cover, and she said she hoped this could be a fresh start and maybe I could let some things go because forgiveness is important. And I told her I agreed about forgiveness while also saying, in a voice I reserve for doctors' offices and HR meetings, that accountability helps forgiveness stick, and she hummed a little and changed the subject, which is what she does when she hears a word she does not want to touch, and I let her, because the mail would do the rest. I also took one small extra step that might sound petty on paper, but in reality was the cleanest move I could make. I forwarded a single-page, authorized user spending summary to both of my parents with a short note that said I believed this page would help them reconcile the statement when it arrived, and I included the authorized username exactly as the issuer printed it, which removed any chance of someone claiming confusion later, and at the bottom of that page, in the same neutral font as everything else, set the line for the replacement dress with the total next to Chloe's name. Perfectly ordinary, easy to understand. Impossible to recast as a misunderstanding once you look at the column heading. My little act of revenge in this episode was simple and polite, which is my favorite kind, because all I did was make it easier for the truth to be read by the people who had spent a lifetime avoiding it. And I did not need to raise my voice or trap anyone with gotchas. I just handed them a map with a bright line from cause to effect and waited, and as I put my phone down after sending that summary, I looked again at the timeline and at the one line that still made my stomach clench, which was not the dress and not the dinner and not the subscription, but a purchase from weeks before that was big enough to change the conversation all by itself, the kind of number that makes even indulgent parents pause before saying the word accident. And I realized I did not have to bring it up at all because the statement would, and when it did, Chloe's smile would not just wobble, it would disappear, and she would know exactly why. The statement landed the way I knew it would, in a white envelope that my parents would never ignore because they still treat anything with their name printed on it as a task that deserves a chair and a pen. And when my mother called to say the bill looked heavier than usual and could I help them make sense of a few lines, I kept my voice steady and suggested we look at it together with Chloe present so there would be no confusion later. Because I have learned that confusion is our family's favorite shelter, and I was done letting anyone move into it rent-free, which is how we ended up seated around their kitchen table with the envelope opened and the pages spread out in a way that gave me the strangest feeling of peace. Not because I wanted a fight, but because for once I did not have to convince anyone of anything. I only had to read what was already printed in plain letters next to the words authorized user. Dad cleared his throat like he always does when he wants to sound neutral, and he tapped the summary box that showed totals by name, which the issuer now prints as if it is the most normal thing in the world. And he said he just wanted to make sure he understood what he was looking at because, in his words, it seemed like Chloe's column had grown quite a bit over the last cycle, and Chloe laughed right away. The same glittery sound she uses when she wants to turn a question into a compliment. And she said something about holiday shopping and family errands, and how sometimes merchants split charges weirdly, which is when I asked, as gently as I could manage, whether she could point to any errands in particular so we could mark them as family expenses and get on with our afternoon, and I slid a highlighter across the table like a peace offering while my father flattened the page with his palm. She picked a line at random and said that one was groceries, except the merchant name was a restaurant we all knew and the charge size matched what a table for 4 would cost on a weekend, and my mother blinked at the word and said, "Oh well." Maybe that was the night we all went out, except the date did not match any family dinner, and the tip number, which the issuer now shows as a separate field, brought the total to a level my parents do not spend unless it is an anniversary, and the room did. That slow quiet drop I always feel when people realize the ground under them is not the story they told themselves, but the one that actually happened, and I did not press the point because I did not need to. I just moved my finger to the next charge and asked the same simple question about whether that was an errand or a personal purchase, and Chloe's confidence faltered for half a second, which for her is a confession, and then she went for indignation, which is her second favorite move, and asked why we were parsing every line like she was on trial, which is when my father surprised both of us by saying no one was on trial. He just wanted to know what he had paid for so he could decide whether to keep paying for it. I said I could make it easier, and I pulled out the single-page authorized user summary I had already prepared, the one that listed Chloe's activity and nothing else, and I slid it to the center of the table and told them it was not about catching anyone. It was about seeing the pattern clearly, because patterns do not care how you feel about them. They keep going until someone interrupts them, and I watched my mother's face change as she traced the dates with her finger and realized how many of these purchases had nothing to do with emergencies or family or anything remotely practical, and Chloe tried another tactic by pretending kindness, saying she had put the replacement dress on the card to help me and that she was only following Mom's request, which would have landed as generous if not for the fact that the statement now showed her name next to that exact charge, and the room understood, without anyone saying it out loud, who had actually helped whom. I kept my tone conversational and asked one small set of questions that I had rehearsed in the car, not because I wanted to sound clever, but because clarity is kinder than chaos. And I asked Chloe if there were any purchases on that list that she believed were made by someone else using her subcard, because if there were we could dispute them right now while everyone was here, and she said no, absolutely not. Because she does not like to be seen as irresponsible, and the idea of a fraud claim offended her pride. So I followed with the next question, which was whether she considered the boutique charges necessary family expenses, since my parents have always said that card is for emergencies or agreed necessities. And she said something about image and goodwill and how appearances matter at work functions, which is the kind of explanation that sounds sensible if you are the one being protected and not the one paying, and my father, who hates being made to feel foolish, rubbed his temples and said he did not recall agreeing to subsidize image management, and that was the first clean crack in the wall, the one no one could patch with a soothing phrase. I did something small then that felt huge to me because it was a kind of revenge that did not need volume, and that was to log into the Issuer app while the conversation drifted between past and future and quietly lock the authorized user card linked to Chloe's name, a feature the bank markets as a safety tool, but which, in this moment, was simply a line in the sand. And when Chloe tried to pivot by saying she would go pick up something for dinner to make it up to everyone and reached for her wallet like she always does when she wants to buy goodwill with other people's money, I told her there was no rush because the card would not work right now, and the way her eyes snapped to mine told me she felt maybe for the first time. What it is like when a boundary is not hypothetical but real, and my mother asked quietly if that was necessary, and I said yes, because none of us seems to be able to tell the difference between kindness and enabling when the card is open. She sputtered something about humiliation and being treated like a child, and I said, still calm, that children do not carry cards with other people's names on the bill and call it adulthood, and then I placed one last page on the table. The one I had not planned to show until I saw how far the denial would stretch, and it was just a printout of a single transaction from weeks earlier, a charge big enough to make my father's eyebrows jump before he could stop them, and I asked Chloe if she wanted to explain why that particular purchase was made on a card she does not pay, and she opened her mouth to try a story, and then closed it because she realized anything she said would be measured against what was on the paper. And my mother whispered her name in that warning tone she uses when she senses a lie coming, and I looked at the two of them and said that this was not about punishing Chloe, it was about putting the cost of her choices where it belongs, and no one answered me. Because for the first time the three of them understood I was not bluffing, and that was when I told them there was one more detail they had not seen yet, and that when they did, there would be no discussion about who was responsible for that big number. Because I had taken care of the responsibility weeks ago, and the bill was already addressed to the right person. I did not raise my voice, I did not gloat, and I did not pretend this was about anything more noble than finally refusing to carry a bill that never had my name on it, so when my father asked what one more detail meant and my mother reached for Chloe's hand like a shield, I took a breath that tasted like relief and said that weeks before the dress ever became a prop in this family's same old show, I had spoken with the issuer about a feature they rolled out where an authorized user can be set up to receive and pay for their own charges directly, not as a separate credit line because I am not an idiot and I know who the account owner is, but as a direct pay arrangement that routes that user's transactions to a mini statement in their name with their own due date and their own payment method, and that the issuer had confirmed in writing that once the authorized user accepts that tiny consent screen everyone skips past, the bank treats those charges as the user's responsibility first, which does not absolve the primary if the user never pays, but it does mean the bank will collect from the user before they ever come knocking on my parents' door. Chloe tried to laugh, but it came out thin, because she could hear where I was going and she was already flipping through the last month of her life in her head, trying to remember where she had clicked what. And I told her gently that the night she placed the order for my replacement dress, which she bragged about doing because she said it showed initiative, she had also clicked a bright little checkbox on the checkout page to use my saved card and keep me updated. Which triggered the issuer's direct pay invitation to the email tied to her authorized user profile, the same email she uses for everything because she loves convenience. And while she was still in that shopping flow, she clicked agree on the consent screen without reading the two short lines that said she was enrolling as a direct pay user for that subcard and that any new purchases made with that subcard would route to her mini statement. And I knew this because the issuer had sent me a copy of the confirmation notice as a secondary contact on the account, which my father had asked me to set up months ago when I was helping him untangle the online logins he keeps locked out of by accident. My father squinted at the page in front of him like he was trying to be fair and thorough, a look I know well and respect, and he asked how I could possibly prove that any particular charge would follow this direct pay setup. And I slid the last printout across the table, a plain email from the issuer with Chloe's name at the top and the words, Authorized User Direct Pay Active in the subject line, followed by a bullet that said charges made with card ending in, and the last 4 digits of the subcard now bill to the user's mini statement unless moved by the account owner, and under that a second bullet that said first billing cycle includes, with the exact date and merchant of the replacement dress and the other big purchase from a few weeks before, the one that had made my father's eyebrows jump, which, yes, she had also made from that sub-card after she had accepted the direct pay enrollment. Because convenience always wins with Chloe until it doesn't. Chloe said that could not be right because she had never given the bank her payment information, and I told her, still calmly, that the issuer allows an authorized user to add their own payment method to the mini statement on first login, but if they do not, The issuer still generates the mini statement and expects payment directly from the user before it drafts anything from the primaries, which is their way of forcing the conversation we were having right now, and that either way the paper trail starts with her name and her card and her consent, and that I had not forged or faked or hacked anything. I had simply turned on a switch the bank created to keep authorized users from treating the account like a magic bucket and to keep families from pretending magic exists. My mother looked shaken, not angry at me in the old familiar way, but startled at how normal the words looked on the page, and she asked if this meant her credit would be destroyed if Chloe ignored the bill, and I said I had been explicit with the issuer that nothing should be drafted from my parents automatically, which is why I had also locked Chloe's subcard so there could be no new charges while we sorted out the past ones, and that the bank would expect Chloe to contact them and make arrangements because the mini statement was in her name with her email, and a due date the computer does not negotiate. For once Chloe did not have a speech ready, so I kept going, not to pile on, but to land the point that mattered to me, which was that I had not done this to humiliate her. I had done it to attach the cost of her choices to her name the way mine always attaches to me, and that the replacement dress she joked about had been the least of the problem because the larger charge from weeks before had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the habit she believes is charming, and if she wanted to keep that habit she could, but she would be paying for it like everyone else does when they are finished being a child. My father, who hates being told what to feel, surprised us both again by saying that the paper was clear, that he would not be intercepting any calls for Chloe this time, and that if the bank contacted him he would direct them to the person named on the statement. And my mother nodded slowly and did not argue, which told me the ground had finally shifted from the story they preferred to the one in their hands. Chloe's smile was gone by then, not replaced by tears or rage, just a quiet calculation I have seen when something finally lands, and she asked me if I had planned this from the beginning, and I told her the truth, which was that I had noticed the feature a while ago and I had turned it on because I was tired of being told to be the bigger person when what they meant was the cheaper one, and that I was done paying for other people's lessons. And if that sounded cold then so be it, because warmth had not done a thing for us except keep the same problem alive. I stood up, collected my copies, and told my parents that I appreciated them trying to replace the dress and that I understood why they fell into that habit, but that I was finished living in a house where kindness is measured in how much someone else is willing to put on their card, and I left the authorized user summary on the table so they would not have to ask me for it later. On my way out, I told Chloe what I wish someone had told me sooner, which was that consequences are not vengeance, they are gravity, and that this was the last time I would be available to discuss a bill that did not have my name on it. She did not answer, which was fine, because the only reply that mattered now would be a payment made on time to a statement with her name printed at the top in letters she could not laugh past, and as I closed the door behind me I felt something I had not felt in years. Not victory exactly, but a steady confidence that I had stopped participating in a game I never agreed to play, and if that leaves a bruise on the family story, then good, because bruises tell the truth about what happened. And this time the truth was simple. I turned the tables without a scene, I put the cost where it belonged, and I walked away without asking for permission.